Hello, everyone. You're watching Eagle News Canada. I'm Thomas I. Likeness, broadcasting from our studio in Edmonton, Canada. And I'm here to bring you news and commentary from Canada, as well as other parts of the world. Our top story this morning, police tape surrounding a public library in a posh North Vancouver suburb. That was the scene of violence yesterday. A man armed with a knife went on a violent rampage, killing one woman. 6 other people were taken to hospital with stab wounds. The attacks began mid-afternoon inside the library. As people fled, the attacker followed them outside where several more people were stabbed. There's no word on the condition of the wounded people. The dead woman has not been identified yet. She's said to be in her late 20s. Police arrested 28-year-old Yannick Bandaogo. He's charged with second-degree murder. Police said on Twitter he's undergone surgery for self-inflicted wounds and is now in police custody. They say he's known to them and has a criminal record. No motive has been established at this time. The library remains a crime scene and is closed until further notice. Investigators spent the day at the building trying to piece together the sequence of events. Outside, some passers-by left flowers in remembrance of the victims. Prime Minister Trudeau and BC Premier John Horgan offered their condolences on social media. Trudeau tweeted that all Canadians are keeping the victims in their thoughts. Horgan said he was devastated by the news of the attack, adding that all of BC is with you. We move to COVID-19 now. The pandemic on target to infect 1 million Canadians since it began last year. Latest projections from the Public Health Agency of Canada predict we'll hit that 1 million mark by early April. Currently, since the pandemic began, more than 965,000 people have been infected. Nearly 23,000 have died of COVID. And as of today, there are just over 42,000 active cases in Canada. But there are even darker clouds on the horizon as the country tries to deal with variants of the virus. Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Theresa Tam says in the past 2 weeks, daily case numbers have risen by more than 30%. And she says current public health measures aren't strong enough to prevent a resurgence of the virus. The resurgence is being driven by the more contagious variants, which can often cause more severe symptoms. And she's encouraging provinces that have large variant outbreaks to bring in tougher measures. Even though more people are being vaccinated, not enough have been immunized to achieve anything close to herd immunity. The month of April has Tam worried as well because there are several religious holidays. She says that's when families and churches have big gatherings, and Tam adds, now is not the time for holiday gatherings. As to when restrictions can safely be lifted, Tam's suggesting it'll probably be at least 6 months. She says if people can get 2 doses of the vaccine by the end of September, life could change. But she says people will still have to take personal precautions until more is known about how vaccines work and what happens to variants. Now, Tam's predictions have been met with scorn by Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. He says past predictions have been exaggerated.
Well, with respect to those models, I would just point out that Dr. Tam's office released modeling 3 weeks ago, which has proven to be completely inaccurate. And let me be blunt about this. We need to bring the public along with us, and constantly publishing models which time after time prove to be spectacularly inaccurate is not a great way to instill public confidence.
Kenney says the Alberta government is closely monitoring COVID numbers in the province, and more restrictions could be brought in if necessary.
Clear when we launched the path forward in the first week of February that if we saw a dangerous spike that, in our view, threatened the capacity of our healthcare system, that we would be prepared to act with additional targeted public health measures.
Doctors are telling us that younger Canadians, those under 40, are being infected with COVID in bigger numbers, variants of the original virus to blame, and the case is more serious, as I said. People who get it have a 60% greater chance of being hospitalized. There's also an increased risk of death. No longer is it just seniors who risk life-threatening symptoms if they get the virus. Well, we talk a lot about variants of the original COVID virus, and they've become the new enemy. They're more contagious, as I said, symptoms more severe. They're becoming the dominant strain. And as we hear in this report from Eagle News correspondent Andre Lejoie, the Canadian government is spending more money to learn about these variants.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. The Government of Canada invests in new research to address COVID-19 variants. The Government of Canada continues to implement its integrated variants of concern strategy to undertake surveillance, sequencing, tracing, and research focus on the COVID-19 virus variant that have been identified in Canada. Those efforts are the key increasing our understanding of those variants and their impact on the health of Canadians to informing our public health measures. To accelerate efforts to understanding and respond to the virus variant, the Honorable Patrick Leduc, Minister of Health, today announced an investment of $14.3 million from the Government of Canada to the Canadian Institute of Health Research to support new research on the COVID-19 virus variant. This includes a $5.3 million in supplementary funding for 90 ongoing COVID-19 projects and $9 million for a new national network that will coordinate and align variants research throughout the country. The Coronavirus Variants Rapid Response Network will be led by Marc-André Langlois from the University of Ottawa. The funding will provide decision makers with guidance regarding drug, therapy, vaccines, effectiveness, and other public health strategies. The strategy is a partnership between the Public Health Agency of Canada, the National Microbiology Laboratory, Health Canada, Genome Canada, and the Canadian Institute of Health Research. Reporting from Ottawa, Canada, this is Andre Lejoie. We live in an interesting time.
The Public Health Agency of Canada has been given a failing grade for the way it responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. In a report to Parliament, Auditor General Karen Hogan says the agency believed COVID-19 would have a minimal impact on the country if an outbreak were to occur. Obviously, they were dead wrong. Hogan found the agency inadequately prepared to respond to the pandemic, underestimating the impact of the virus. And she says the Public Health Agency has had problems for a couple of decades, problems that were pointed out by previous Auditors General. She says those issues have never been fixed. Hogan also had harsh words for Canada Border Services. She says there's no indication of whether Border Services or the Public Health Agency knew whether returning travelers followed quarantine protocols. She says they referred only a few of the travelers for in-person follow-up to verify compliance with quarantine orders. And Hogan adds that of the individuals considered to be at risk of non-compliance, the agency referred only 40% to law enforcement, and she says then the two agencies did not know whether law enforcement actually contacted them. Also criticizing the federal government is the Premier of Canada's largest province, Doug Ford. Ford upset about the lack of progress with Canada's vaccine rollout. So far, just over 5 million people have been vaccinated. That's just under 7% of the population. We're 55th in the world in terms of the percentage of people immunized. Ford is worried because of the resurgence of cases in Ontario, his province reporting more than 2,000 new cases a day. The variants are running rampant, and despite having the infrastructure to vaccinate people, Ford says there's no inoculant to fill those needles, and he's blaming the federal government.
You know, I've been very diplomatic, and I've been very complimentary and collaborative with the federal government. Enough's enough. This is becoming a joke. We need more vaccines. Simple as that. And we've shown the people of Ontario, we have the capacity, we have the infrastructure. There's 83,000 people vaccinated yesterday. We have hundreds of thousands of people waiting in line. And at the end of the day, they've dropped the ball.
The province says it has the capacity to vaccinate 3 to 4 times as many people as it is now, perhaps as many as 300,000 a day, but there's no vaccine.
This is the root cause. We do not have enough vaccines from the federal government, and it's a joke. 55th in the world. I'm done. Sorry. I'm this is frustrating as anything.
So while the people of Ontario wait for their shots, more are getting sick. Hospital beds are filling up with COVID patients. So, Mr. Premier, as we enter into the 13th month of various restrictions, what is your message to the people of Ontario?
What I want people to do, is just to follow the protocols. That's absolutely critical. Don't be having people over. That's where the problem starts. If you start having parties out, at your house and, so on and so forth as the weather warms up. So we should all be on high alert, absolutely high alert. But, I'm going to be frank. People are tired. I'm telling you, they're tired. They're exhausted out there. They need a little bit of fresh air. But please do it very carefully. That's all we're asking.
That message could really apply anywhere in the world. We're all dealing with resurgences due to variants. And remember, although there's light at the end of the tunnel, we have to have patience because it is a long tunnel. Still to come, vaccine passports, fake COVID test results, and help for the homeless in Toronto. Eagle News Canada continues.
Hey there, Arnie Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net25.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced, not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Aguila Pilipinas! A 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Aguila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Aguila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science, and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to our help outdoor.
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
You're watching Eagle News America. I'm Thomas. I like this. Let's take a look at how other countries are coping with COVID. Across Europe, cases on the increase. For all intent and purpose, Europe is at the beginning of a third wave. Central Europe reporting high hospitalization and death rates. Lockdowns are either being extended or brought back. Streets are nearly empty as people stay home. The biggest factor in this, in a region that had thought it had tamed the virus. The biggest factor? Variants. As well, slow rollout of vaccines is also fueling the third wave. Quite frankly, demand is outstripping supply for the vaccine. There just isn't enough anywhere in the world being made to satisfy the needs of every nation. Let's look at South America now. Brazil, just a disaster with a number of deaths averaging 2,400 a day. What you see up there on the screen is typical. Experts expecting that to rise to 4,000 deaths a day in the very near future. The nation on track to exceed the United States in the number of deaths from COVID by the end of this year. And of course, the problem starts at the top. Brazil's president, well, he doesn't believe public health restrictions are really necessary. And at the rate of infection today, it may be too late to bring them in and expect them to do any good. Panama is trying to keep more cases of the virus from crossing its borders. The Central American country has banned travelers from South America. And Mexico now saying the death toll from COVID is higher than what it had been publishing, what they've been telling the people. The government admitting that now it is more than 321,000. That's 60% more than the previous reports of 201,000 that had been made public. The United States remains the country with the most number of cases, the most number of deaths from COVID. There's still a lot of misery while we wait for this pandemic to subside. Vaccine passports. I've talked about these before. This would be some kind of a certificate or card that you could show to prove you've been vaccinated against COVID-19. How do you feel about this? In British Columbia, a public opinion poll found that 3/4 of those asked thought they were a good idea if used for international travel, and I think that's likely where we'll see them. They're already required in some countries. You have to prove you've been vaccinated against diseases that are endemic in those countries if you want to travel there. But whether Canada will require them for people coming here, not yet known. Been the topic of several international meetings. But vaccine passports for domestic use? How would they be accepted? Well, let's go back to that opinion poll. In BC, at least 2/3 thought it would be a good idea for interprovincial travel if you wanted to go to another province. 6 out of 10 people like the idea for having to provide proof of vaccination to travel within the borders of the province. And a majority supported vaccine passports for certain kinds of jobs or going to large public events, things like theaters or concerts. Somehow, I don't see domestic vaccine passports being practical. Enforcement would be a nightmare. And then there are ethical, legal concerns, such as, would they violate people's rights? Would they be constitutional? Well, people coming into Canada have to present border services with evidence of a negative COVID test before they're allowed into the country. And it seems some people, just a very small number, a handful, are forging these documents. There's a report that since the beginning of the year, more than 24 people tried to get into Canada with fake test results. If you're caught doing this, it could be costly because failing to comply with border restrictions could land you in jail for up to 6 months or you could face a fine of up to, you sitting down, $750,000, $750,000, all to save a few dollars on a legitimate test. Is it really worth it to fake the results? In Toronto, the city has more money to provide shelter for the homeless. Here's EBC's Joshua Santillana with the details.
Toronto is providing additional funding to all shelters, 24-hour respite sites, temporary response programs, and daytime drop-ins. The funding goes towards supporting these centers' implementation of stronger infection prevention and control measures in response to the new COVID-19 variants of concern. Here is Mayor John Tory for more details.
Today, I'm announcing that the city, through Shelter Support and Housing Administration, is making $3 million additional available to all shelters, 24-hour respite sites, temporary response programs, and daytime drop-ins to support the implementation of additional infection prevention and control measures recently announced by the city in direct response to the emergence of the variants of concern. City staff continue to work closely with our healthcare partners to roll out vaccination clinics as well at our shelter and homelessness services. We also are working to get people vaccinated by making these additional resources available to ensure that our frontline staff are able to continue to enhance protection for vulnerable residents.
According to the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, the most recently conducted research in 2018 states that the total number of enumerated groups is over 8,500, with 500 living outdoors. Of those staying in city-administered shelters, about 3,800 are non-refugee claimants, over 2,600 are refugee asylum claimants, almost 500 are staying in 24-hour respite sites, over 100 are staying in 24-hour women's drop-ins, and about 1,000 are staying in provincial institutions. The overall percentage of point-in-time count respondents who identified as Indigenous is 16%, with 38% of them living outdoors and 20% of them staying at 24-hour respite sites. According to a study led by Lucy Richard in 2020, released by ICES Western University, and Alliance for Healthier Communities, it was found that people with recent history of homelessness were more likely to have a positive COVID test result. They were also 20 times more likely to be admitted to hospital for COVID-19 and over 5 times more likely to die within 21 days of their first positive test result. As of Saturday, March 27 in Toronto, there are 17 shelters and congregate settings with active COVID-19 outbreaks, with 309 active cases. To date, a total of 1,193 positive cases have been linked to all shelter outbreaks. In Toronto, Joshua Santayana, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Oh, for those who can afford housing, the market in Canada has heated up. All across the country, house prices are on the rise. But an economic report from the Royal Bank of Canada advises the government do not offer any more help to first-time homebuyers. Economist Robert Hogue writes in the report that unless the government does something to boost the supply of new homes, any further measures of help will lead to even higher prices. Hogue says inventories are generally low and property values have soared to levels far outside historic norms. Fueling this demand are record low interest rates, increased household savings, and of course, the pandemic. Hogue writes that these factors will eventually reverse and run their course, and he fears not making policy changes will have long-term effects on the economy. As well, he says, money used to inflate real estate values is being taken away from more productive uses in the economy. And finally, Hogue says, sky-high property values, well, they widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. He adds there's a need for more affordable rental accommodations. Still to come, we'll hear from my good friend Alfred Asenis, our Hawaii Bureau Chief. This is Eagle News Canada.
Start up your weekday mornings with edutainment, news, and information kasama ang inyong paboritong Net25 shows. Samahan ang inyong paboritong morning barkada sa Pambansang Almusal at 5 a.m. Tatalakayin mga pangunahing balita sa pagtutulungan ng Radyo Agila at Net25. Samahan si Weng de la Fuente sa Balitalakayan, 7 a.m. Saganang Mamamayan at 8 a.m. NHK World at 9 a.m. Eagle News International at 10 a.m. At mga balitang dapat niyong malaman mula sa Agila, Pilipinas at 11 a.m. This is your morning startup every weekday mornings only here on Net25.
Sobrang perfect lahat ng stands.
Talagang professional yung inyong pagkaka-execute.
Uy, may wow factor, may pasabog. Tumaas ang balahibo ko.
I don't know what else to say. Overwhelming performance.
Ang bubuo ng line-up para sa nalalapit nating Quarter 2 semifinals. Who will it be?
Broadcast journalist Wayne De La Fuente returns on Philippine television and radio to deliver top stories and engage with the country's policymakers, shapers, and movers. Tatalakayin ang mga pangunahing balita alas 7 ng umaga mula Lunes hanggang Biyernes, live sa teleradyo ng Net25 at Radyo Aguila DCEC 1062. Kasama si Wayne De La Fuente sa Balitalakayan.
Watching Eagle News Canada, I'm Thomas I. Likens. To Hawaii now, where news analyst Alfred Asenas has had a chance to sit down with Congressman Ed Case. Now, Congressman Case represents Honolulu, and he and Alfred talked about the past 12 months, especially how the pandemic affected Case.
The Honorable Ed Case, who represents Hawaii's 1st Congressional District, acknowledged the challenges he faced a year ago at a time still fraught with much fear and uncertainty.
It's easy to forget that we know a lot more about COVID-19 today than we did a year ago. A year ago, we didn't know anything about COVID-19. People started getting sick. They went into hospitals. They went into nursing homes. They got sick in nursing homes. They were cared for by folks, including many from the Philadelphia community, who basically just said, that's our job, and I'm going to go take care of people as I always did. And we didn't know what the personal protective equipment was going to work or not work. We didn't know how contagious it was. We didn't know a lot. It was especially acute in those first couple of months. And I got on the phones with people that, had been working just days straight because there was so much demand, so much need. And they went home to their families, because they had to. They couldn't leave their families. They went from a hospital back into, a situation like that. So there was a lot of risk all around. And so those are the folks that inspired me in the last year.
The 68-year-old Big Island native noted that even with the pandemic, the challenge of everyday politics while performing his sworn duties continues.
Well, so much of the world that I inhabit, the world of politics, especially in Washington, D.C. today, is a world of polarization and division and partisanship and people yelling and screaming at each other in one way, shape, or form, and that can be very discouraging.
Finally, the congressman shared his views on the road ahead while assuring his constituents that his office will remain available to provide assistance.
COVID-19 is going to be with us for a long time here. We're not out of the woods. As we talk today, we're seeing a resurgence in our country of COVID-19. Right here in Hawaii, we're seeing an uptick in infections here in Hawaii, which shouldn't surprise anybody, given that we're open again and we've got tourists coming in here, and we've increased the risk. And so we're not going to be out of COVID-19 anytime soon, either as a public health matter, or certainly not economically, certainly not for our communities throughout Hawaii. And in this time of great need, our federal government is really the only institution that can deliver assistance at the scale and breadth and depth needed, which we've done with the CARES Act and with further actions in December, and then more recently the American Rescue Plan trillions of dollars, of which billions and billions have come here to Hawaii. But all of that is critical, but still there are great needs. And so I think we still have to help each other. And and my office is very much focused on helping our Hawaii from a federal government perspective with federal spending. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for federal spending. So I spend all my time on that. But also individual concerns. We have a lot of folks that have their own individual issues and concerns. Sometimes people think, well, my problem is too small to call my congressman, and that's exactly the wrong thing to think. Our job is to help. So many of the folks I serve have questions with their Social Security or immigration or veterans benefits or Medicare or any number of things.
Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, Alfred Asenas, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Other American news across the country. Thousands of people took part in demonstrations yesterday against anti-Asian violence. Rallies were held in about 60 American cities, including Atlanta, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit, and Portland. These demonstrations have been triggered by the March 16th gun rampage in Georgia. That left 8 people dead, including 6 women of Asian descent. Irving Lee, a demonstrator in Queens, says there's another reason for the racism. Lee says the anti-Asian violence in the U.S. is a byproduct of American foreign policy. You recall when COVID-19 began spreading in the United States, a number of politicians, including U.S. President Donald Trump, dubbed it the Wuhan or Chinese virus. Well, Lee says that's had devastating effects on Asian communities. This is what others marching in New York City had to say yesterday.
Everyone I know who's Asian has been a victim of violence or of harassment, assault. We get spat at, we get yelled at, we get stared at. People move away when we come. People think that we have the virus, but I'm no more able to get the virus than you or anyone listening.
What else? I guess kids asking me, oh, are you related to Bruce Lee, or like very small things like that start from childhood. But then other things that also happen is kind of people being physically aggressive with me in a very nuanced way. That's hard to call out. I guess what people call microaggressions.
I was born here, and it's disappointing to see that we're being treated the way that we're being treated right now.
Similar rallies were held on the weekend in Canada in the cities of Vancouver and Edmonton. The flow of migrants crossing the U.S. border from Mexico continues unabated. Many of them are teenagers or children traveling without their parents. They're coming to America for opportunity. They're coming to escape dangerous conditions in their Central American countries. It's a month-long journey to walk from Guatemala to Texas. Around the clock, they cross the Rio Grande River between Mexico and the U.S., hoping to attain asylum. Not all of them make it alive. Once on American soil, they walk about a mile on a sandy path, through thorny bushes, to surrender. That's right, surrender to U.S. Border Patrol agents. And here authorities will try to reunite the children with their families. Some will be freed to await their asylum hearings. Others, they'll be deported. Why do they keep trying? Well, many say U.S. President Joe Biden's immigration reforms have given them hope, even though Biden has urged them not to come. Amazon could soon find itself sitting down at the bargaining table, that's right, with a union, trying to hammer out a contract with its workers. Employees at an Amazon warehouse in Alabama are trying to form that union. Tomorrow, the deadline for the 5,800 workers at the facility near Birmingham to vote on whether they will join the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders dropped by last week to support the workers, rally the troops, and he says he's encouraged.
This is historically a very anti-union state, and that is why I am incredibly moved and impressed by the courage of these workers. This is no small thing in Alabama to stand up to a large corporation and the wealthiest man on earth to demand dignity and justice.
The union drive is being watched closely across the country and, if successful, could spark unionization of other Amazon warehouses. In New York City, unemployed musicians, well, they're longing to return to the stage. They miss the audiences. And the stage they've found, an empty storefront on Manhattan's Upper West Side. Passers-by are treated to pop-up concerts of varying genres. The normal soundscape here is car horns, construction work, and pigeon coos, but on this day, it was the strains of Beethoven and Debussy. Pianist Spencer Myers says audience may have missed live music, but musicians have missed performing even more.
I think musicians worldwide have been really starved for that experience. We've been continuing to practice on our own and make music on our own, but to make music with another person, number one, and also to play for a live audience is really something we've been very starved for.
It's really a reciprocal relationship that we need audience to audience. It's really a reciprocal relationship that we need audience to audience needs us, and being able to bring the music to people like we did today is really something unique and special.
Now, if anything, Katz says the pandemic has shown us how much we need the arts.
One of the lessons from the pandemic is just how much people just hunger and need music and theater and dance and any sort of live art that you can encounter personally. It's something that really people need the same way that they need food and water.
Up next, we'll have stories from other parts of North America and the world. You're watching Eagle News Canada.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights. Sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Watching Eagle News Canada, I'm Thomas I. Likeness. Well, it's been 6 days now since the Suez Canal has been blocked by a ship that is wedged between its banks. And it's crippling international trade, causing millions of dollars worth of losses. Another 2 tugboats from Europe steaming their way to the canal to help the others that are already there to try to free that ship. Authorities hope they, along with the high tides, will be able to dislodge that container ship. Now, crews have been able to move the ship a bit, and that's given them a bit of optimism, but If they can't dislodge it during tonight's high tide, it'll be another month before the tides reach that level again. Still no indication whether it was technical or human error that caused the grounding of the ship. For Egypt, this has been costly. The country is losing $12 to $14 million in tolls every day that canal is closed. And it's estimated that more than $9.5 billion with a B dollars worth of cargo is being held up each day between Europe and Asia. Certainly a nightmare for shippers and the business communities in Europe and Asia. In Myanmar, a few people returned to the streets after the bloodiest crackdown yet in Yangon's Thaketa township. At least 107 people were killed as security forces opened fire on the anti-coup protesters. The dead included 7 children. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the military ousted and detained civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi on February 1st. That triggered protests calling for a return to democracy. The military didn't believe the election results. They claimed a lot of corruption. This past Saturday, the military staged a major show of force to mark its annual Armed Forces Day. Since the coup, at least 423 people have died in the crackdowns. The defense chiefs of 12 nations, including the United States, Britain, Japan, and Australia, well, they've all condemned the use of lethal force against civilians. They say a professional military is responsible for protecting, not harming, the people it serves. In the Middle Eastern country of Qatar, stray dogs a problem. The country trying to deal with them before it hosts the World Cup next year. Thousands of stray dogs are roaming industrial areas and abandoned land in Qatar. Many of them are fed and cared for by volunteers and animal welfare groups. Now, this informal network of rescuers also intervenes when dogs are found injured, often at the hands of humans. Some of them have gunshot wounds, others are stabbed. Some have been hit by cars, hit and runs. Faced with a growing number of complaints in some residential areas, the Qatari government has launched a scheme to clear stray dogs from the streets. But that's provoked a rare public outcry. Animal rescue groups are challenging authorities. They want them to explain what exactly is being done with the captured canines. It's been a busy time for the NBA. 18 teams were in action on Saturday. The Utah Jazz continues to prove why it's the best team in the league. Plus, Spurs' Greg Popovich becomes, get this, the 3rd head coach to win 1,300 games. Now, to bring us up to date on these stories and more, EBC's Tenny Samagi joins us live from New York. How are things in the Big Apple, Tenny?
Well, everything in the Big Apple is great with the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets.
You got to go downtown to Manhattan, though, and take in those musicians down there. That looks just great, and I heard some of the sound from it, and I love classical music anyway. But we're not here to talk about classical music. We're here to talk about the NBA. Bring us up to date, Tenny.
We'll talk about classical music, which is also my second passion too. But yes, let's go back to the NBA, and we're going to talk about the Utah Jazz. They won their 5th straight game, their second back-to-back game against the Memphis Grizzlies on Saturday, behind Donovan Mitchell's 35 points. The Jazz continue to prove why they are the best team in the NBA.
They're a good team, and it's particularly when we came out of the gate strong. I think you see leads evaporate all the time. In this league. That happened in some ways last night. But I thought we had a couple of stretches where we turned the ball over and gave them some things in transition. But by and large, I thought we did a good job, adjusting to the game when they went zone. And, I like the fact that we ran.
Obviously, with Mike out, fell a lot. The ball's in my hands and Joe's hands a lot more. I understand with the man down, everybody has to raise their level, and I just did it through scoring. Some days it's passing, some days it's rebound, some days it's defense. But doing whatever is necessary. And that was just my mindset: just be aggressive, understanding they were going to come out and play hard after last night. And I think we all, as a group, did a great job of continuing to apply pressure throughout the entire game.
In other NBA news, San Antonio Spurs head coach Greg Popovich hit a career milestone, joining legendary NBA coaches Lenny Wilkens and Don Nelson in the 1,300 wins club. The Spurs coach became the third head coach to reach that milestone, as their team held on to defeat the Chicago Bulls on Saturday.
We made shots. You make shots, everything looks a lot better. But overall, we shared it pretty well. DeMar and Derek, DeJounte had 22 assists between the three of them and only 4 turnovers. So that was a big part of, getting some open shots. And I thought our intensity was good defensively. Rebounded pretty well.
We'll continue to have more stories and highlights on the NBA throughout the season. In New York, Tenny Tumagi, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
Tenny, for once, we've got a lot of time. We can actually talk about things. We can get into a little bit of depth here in the NBA. First of all, have you got your crystal ball out there?
I have it right here.
Good. I want you to look into it. I want you to tell me about the future. Can Utah win the NBA title this season? Is that possible?
Before I get into that, Tom, I have to say that the Utah Jazz needs to change their name because Jazz didn't originate in Utah.
That should be more like New Orleans.
It was originally New Orleans Jazz until the team had moved to Utah and they never changed it. But we'll get back to the Jazz. They're a very underrated team. They don't get much respect because all the teams in the Western Conference, everyone pays attention to the Lakers, obviously, because of LeBron James. And then there's the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And then you have up-and-coming teams like the Phoenix Suns, Portland Trail Blazers. Damian Lillard is having a phenomenal season, who's actually my pick to be this year's MVP. But the Jazz, they're having a beyond, probably a fabulous season, and Coach Quinn Snyder is by far the coach of the year this year. And I'll say he's carried this team. There's a lot of chemistry. Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, they're playing beyond. They were All-Stars this year. Mike Conley made his first NBA All-Star appearance after 13 seasons in the NBA. And then our beloved Filipino NBA basketball player, the lone Filipino, Jordan Clarkson, is this year's probably going to win the Sixth Man Year award. He's been terrific off the bench. He's scoring like a maniac, which is, his specialty is. He is a shooting guard, and well, we'll see. The thing is, Tom, the regular season record, that's all forgotten when the playoffs come. And then in recent years, I would say recent seasons, the Jazz hasn't been able to level up, especially last year, where we saw the Jazz, I would say, be defeated, or they lost in 7 games in the first round after going up 3-1 to the Denver Nuggets. But this is a different team this year, and I will say I still pick the Lakers depending if LeBron James and Anthony Davis recover from their injuries, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Jazz meet my beloved Brooklyn Nets in the NBA Finals. But I still favor my Brooklyn Nets to win this year.
But you're right. It's all different when you get into the playoffs. What you did in the regular season no longer counts, and things can change drastically. A team can turn on a dime. either way.
Exactly. You never know. It could be, they're the top team right now, but come playoffs, whoever they play in the first round, they have a chance to, they have the chance to defeat them in the first round. But it's the NBA. It's a very competitive league. Everybody is hungry. Everybody wants that Larry O'Brien trophy.
The NBA, anything can happen. So I'm going to put down in my column here under the sleepers, Utah is a sleeper for the title.
Yes.
I've been accurate? Okay. Well, now let's talk about Greg Popovich. He's hit that 1,300 mark. He's the third one to be able to do that. Would you consider him, if not one of the best coach in NBA history?
I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say why. And everyone's going to be like, what? Not Phil Jackson? Okay, Greg Popovich is not only a great coach, he is also the president of the San Antonio Spurs. Probably the most organized team. There's rarely any drama. I would just probably recall the one drama that happened during his tenure is the whole Kawhi Leonard situation where he didn't want to play with the Spurs anymore. But the Spurs have been a great organization. Pops has been very consistent, and I will probably love to see the Spurs back into the playoffs. They are in contention. And this guy also, there's no, I will say, he's very blunt, very hardcore. He is a military man. So a lot of that military mindset translates to the basketball court. And if you go in depth with his coaching history, he wasn't a successful college coach. I think from what I've read, he started, I think he had one season where he was 0 for 22 or something. And then
just looking at him, Tenny, just look at him up there on the screen. He looks like a tough guy. He looks like a vet who he's finished his contract with the military and he's out there coaching basketball now. You don't argue with him. You can see that in his eyes there.
Yeah, even when he talks to media, he'll say he'll say what's in his mind, especially when it comes to politics. He shows no love for our former president. If you have,
I remember that.
Think about that. But if you also look into how many coaches he mentored, his great mentor, one of his mentees, I should say. Is it mentees? Mentors? Mentees?
Mentees, I guess. Yeah.
Mentees, right? Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr played under Pop. They won a championship. Plus, he also, a lot of that experience from learning from Pops came from as a player, and then that also transcends to Steve Kerr's career as a coach with the Golden State Warriors.
And there you have it. It's more than just the win-loss column with Pops there. More than just the win-loss. He's got a legacy. He's got a legacy that lives on, as you said, in some of these other coaches, some of the players that he's developed. I mean, I might go along with you. He just might have been the best in NBA history.
Tim Duncan. And here's the cool thing, Tom. He coached not only Tim Duncan, who is one of the best NBA centers, not I would say ever, one of the best NBA centers, especially in our generation. But there's Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. These are guys who became all-stars, and then they were drafted.
Great guys, and we got to get out of here because the clock has got us beat here. So that's today's Eagle News Canada. I want to thank you for joining us, especially you, Tenny. I always enjoy discussing things with you. I'm Thomas I. Likeness, and truly, we live in interesting times.